Hello, listeners. We are back. It's a new year, but we are still on our Christmas break from the main feed. We're still feeling festive, but we wanted to make sure you all had an episode to listen to whilst we're away. So we've decided to put this up on the main feed. This is an episode where we covered series 1 of Severance back in 2022 because the new series is coming out, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, we're really excited for season 2. It's been a long time coming. We're desperate to find out what's going on with all the innies and the outies as well in the world of Severance.
Yeah, so series 2 will be coming out on 17th of January, I believe, this year. So as such, we are doing our recap episode of series 1 and putting it out here on the main feed for you to listen to. So we hope you enjoy it.
Hello, my name is Mark S. And I have, of my own free accord, elected to undergo the procedure known as severance. I give consent to sever my memories between my work life and my personal life. I acknowledge that once the procedure is complete, I will be unable to access my personal memories whilst on the severed floor.
Say gratitude.
Nor will I retain work memories.
Hey!
Sorry, when I return home at the end of the day. I make these statements freely.
Okay, so this was created by a guy called Dan Erickson, who I'd not heard of before. I did a little IMDb search and I couldn't find much that he'd done in the past. But of course, it is also attached to the big name, director Ben Stiller. Director Ben Stiller seems like a weird thing to say still. And Aoife McArdle as well has directed a few episodes of this series. So it's quite an eclectic mix of people for a sci-fi show, I feel.
Yeah, but I think that this is well within tone for Ben Stiller's directorial things. I mean, I'm thinking right back to like The Cable Guy, you know, in his oeuvre. But obviously, he is more of a comedy person. You can definitely see the comedic DNA here. There's some genuinely comedic moments which actually don't sit terrifically well. Is that fair to say? This is pure drama verging into thriller territory at times, especially as the pace builds up towards the end of the series. So the out and out comedic things, and I'm thinking of like Rickon, the character of Rickon, pretty much everything about him and his book is very comedic.
Yeah.
And some of the Egan stuff as well, particularly Keir Egan, the digital representation of him. That's all very comedic, and I get that, you know, Ben Stiller's very good at that, but that stuff felt a little bit out of place, even though, you know, comic relief in a serious show's fairly benign, isn't it?
Yeah, and like thinking about Ben Stiller's sort of switch into more drama stuff as well. Did you ever watch Escape at Dannemora?
No, never even heard of it.
See, that was a great sort of limited series that he did, and it was a drama, and it was basically telling this, I think it was based on a true story about a married prison employee who gets involved with 2 convicted murderers, and then they escape from the prison. It's really good. I highly recommend it, and sort of just that suddenly just popped back into my head because of course Ben Stiller directed that as well. So he is like bit by bit making a name for himself as a director, and I think this series really proves he's got the chops for it.
Good to see. I mean, good to see him branching out into more serious stuff and more television stuff, I guess, as well. Certainly. I mean, I think he's an excellent director, but I know him primarily as a director of comedy. You know, Zoolander, Tropic Thunder, those are amazing films, very well made, and he's got nothing to prove, I think, as a director, but being responsible for he's not responsible for all 9 episodes of Severance. It's also Aoife McArdle's work, but it's his production company, I think, as well. So he's got some sort of producer oversight there. You know, this is maybe equally his baby with Dan Erickson. I don't quite know the division of labour there, but yeah, seeing him branch out into that kind of storytelling is great. It's cool, and he's really good at it, and it works really well. So I'm happy to see plenty more from Ben Stiller as an auteur of drama.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this has already been commissioned for a second series, which I'm sure we'll get into as we carry on with today's episode. But let's talk about the show then. So the initial introduction, it really sort of like hits you in the face, this show. So did you know anything about it going in?
Just the smallest, simplest premise. Not even the premise of the show, just the premise of the medical procedure of Severance. That's all I understood going in. So I obviously understood why Helly was lying unconscious and completely amnesiac on the table in the first episode, but I didn't know anything about the plot beyond that. Did you know anything? You don't really need to, do you? And you know.
No. Yeah, so I knew that element to it as well, and I was wondering if you knew that going in, because it's such a striking image to have in the first episode, where you see Helly on that desk and there's just this disembodied voice talking to her, asking her these really weird questions. And as the show sort of like progresses, you find out more about these characters, but there's so much that it keeps back as well, because the main premise is like you were talking about. These people go to work and they are severed. They've been through this process called severance, and that means that they have no idea of what their lives were, their personal lives, any of their sort of background, as soon as they go into the workplace. And when they're in the workplace, they don't know who they are. They just know they're at work, and they know sort of like the basic things about being a person. So they're not like complete infants or anything. They've still got all of their sort of like, I don't know how to put it, sort of their logistical memories or something like that.
They've got all their faculties.
Yes.
Yeah, they're sort of intelligent adult humans, but with no memories. So the language they use on the show is that their memory has been bifurcated and is geographically restricted, I think, is how they refer to it. So they enter through like a force field or whatever, and as they pass through that, that's the division of where they can remember work or home, but never both.
And it's interesting seeing sort of like how the two characters are different, and they're referred to as innies when they're at work, and then outies when they're out of the workplace. And again, that just made me think of belly buttons throughout the entire first bit of the series. But I soon got to grips with that. And it's interesting seeing how their personalities are the same, and they still have the same sort of like wants and needs and things like that. But there is something very different about those characters. I mean, it's different for each character in the show as well. Like certain characters seem a bit more similar in both senses, whether they're in or out of the workplace. But there's a lot to it. It's quite complex, isn't it?
Well, that's the kind of one of the many big questions about the show, isn't it? But I think there are some fundamental personality traits at a very base level that all of the characters carry with them. We don't know that for Dylan, for example. We never really get to know his outie in this series. But we get to know, I'd say, enough of the other three, Irving, Mark, and Helly, that something about their personality, I think, carries through. There's something about Helly is very like defiant and self-assured, and I think that you could argue that comes from her outie's background. Mark is just sort of, I don't know what, like kind of given up to the innie role, I think, because of circumstances and grief weighing on his mind. And definitely in Irving, we just learn at the very end that he might be a military man. I wasn't quite sure if that was his Navy gear or his father's, but he might have a military background. And I think the way he's got an adherence to Lumon ideology that I think is befitting of someone who might have had a career in the Navy and, has had to adjust to that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, because when he opens the box, it is his dad's Navy suit, but then also around his house or his flats are all these sort of medals and things like that, which look like they are his. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely implied that he's had some sort of military service in some form or other. And just like all of those character things, and they're all influenced by where they are, whether they're inside or outside the workplace, like we were saying. But the style of the workplace as well kind of affects that too, because you see in one of the early episodes when Mark is going into the workplace, he has to change completely. He takes he's putting on like a different suit almost, I think, and he's definitely changing he's changing his shoes, isn't he? He changes his shoes from like hiking boots, and
he's wearing quite a timeless generic suit. Like the suit could be anywhere, but the most noticeable things are the shoes, his watch, and his security card. We know the security card has to happen because it's covered in all sorts of writing that can't go downstairs. We learn that later. But I thought the watch was particularly interesting, and the shoes. There was something about the way he was changing into something slightly more old-fashioned, even though his main outfit, his suit, stayed the same. And then he appears in this sort of timeless liminal space downstairs. I wasn't sure what era they were supposed to think they existed in, you know?
Yeah, because the technology down there, the actual show is set in 2020. So it's got that sort of, like, when they're in the outside world, it's very much present day. But there is something about that workplace which is kind of, it's verging on nostalgia in the way that it's kind of like modelled on sort of 60s, 70s kind of look to it almost. And especially the technology is deliberately dated. It's all very old looking computers, and everything is very sort of sterile, but with touches of colour here and there. And there's sort of like this sort of red, blue motif throughout the entire show, which is kind of reminded me of The Matrix a little bit with the whole red blue thing. To me, sort of the technology aspect of it made me think, okay, so maybe this is because they don't want to get hacked or anything like that, or they don't want that technology sort of like getting out of the workplace. So maybe that's why it's slightly dated. But even so, it's sort of like, it's a very sort of strange place that they've been put into. Yeah.
And I think it might not be the first shot, but one of the early ways we're introduced to that area is like a tracking shot as Mark walks Helly into the macro data refinement department. And they're walking through corridors for, in cinematic terms, an insanely long amount of time. It's a really long take where they go through a corridor that is full of left and right turns, but no doorways. So that, like, I think when you're just watching it, it just feels weird. But when you really break that down, it's like a corridor shouldn't last that long and turn this many times without any rooms off to the side to just, what are you turning around?
Yeah.
And that's the whole architecture of the severed floor, isn't it? It's as expressed by Petey's like scribbled map. It's like dream architecture, isn't it? You're wandering through blank hallways with what feels like no idea where you're going, but all the characters just sort of inherently know, well, I know how to get to MDR, and everywhere else is like a scary other place that I'm not supposed to go to and don't know the way to, and I might get lost. So it feels like this dream architecture that they're entering.
Yeah, and the fact that they are going down into this workplace as well. So they take the lift down, and then there's no windows, there's no outside world at all. So it is completely cut off. It is severed, like you were saying, it's the severed floor. And there's something just eerie about that, isn't there? It's sort of like, it feels claustrophobic, and you see that claustrophobia in the characters as well. Specifically, sort of Helly is sort of, she wants to get out from this floor. She wants to escape. But that sort of closing in is there, even though, like you're saying, it's sort of endless corridors that you could go through. So there might be a way out, but for them, it's just this claustrophobic space.
Yeah, it's important that this place where they work is would be an unpleasant place to be for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, regardless of the Severance operation. Like if your job was based here, that wouldn't be very nice. There would have to be mitigating factors with, salary and quality of work. Like it just wouldn't be nice to be down there with no natural light in a sort of weird maze. And then they add on the kind of the way they're treated, which is awful and, they're tortured basically. And then you add on the nature of severance, meaning that not only would this be awful for anybody, it's also the only concept of life that the innies have.
It was so weird as well, because the way you were talking about the corridors as well reminded me of when I used to work in certain studios, like TV studios, and they were built in that kind of way. Like there's one up in Manchester which really is very similar, and you would get to work in the morning and it would be light outside, and then you're just in the studio going around these corridors to go to different offices. There's no windows, and you come out and it would be dark, and you'd have no idea where the day had gone because you'd just been in that work mode. And everything about this show is about work-life balance and this sort of juxtaposition between like a personal life and your work life, and sort of what the differences are and that kind of thing. But then having them in two completely different worlds adds this kind of it's all quite eerie, isn't it? There's something unsettling about this whole show and the way they are depicting all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's instantly eerie. That kind of dream architecture has an eerie quality, but then I think it's really through the performances of the non-severed staff. So Ms. Cobell, Patricia Arquette, and Mr. Milchick, played by Trammell Tillman, who are so menacing and threatening in everything they do, especially Trammell Tillman as Milchick. He's brilliant in this. I think Patricia Arquette is like, she's going for scary from the get-go, and it's good, and it's a good performance, but the way that Milchick just seems creepy and then slowly reveals exactly how scary he is as it goes on, it's such a good performance from him. The switch on his face between a smile and like measured rage is so good.
Yeah, because everything that the measuredness of him and his performance is so good, because even when he is like seething with anger, he will be very sort of controlled with it. And you can see it in sort of like his mannerisms and the way he talks. And like even in the finale, when he's trying to get through the door, he's still sort of like trying to keep a cool head. And there's something just quite unnerving about that. Whereas Patricia Arquette's character, you see her like become a bit manic, and especially when she loses her job later down the line, she throws a complete hissy fit. She loses her shit. She is chucking stuff all over the place. So you know there's something more to her character for her to sort of feel that way. Whereas, yeah, Milchick's different.
You ran a 266 on Irving B?
Yeah. Just now.
Huh.
I thought it might dissuade him from spending so much time with Bert G. I'm sorry, should I have consulted you?
No. Good initiative.
I saw Miss Casey down there. You're having her watch LER.
I am.
May I ask why?
The light of discovery shines truer upon a virgin meadow than a beaten path. I'm trying something new with Miss Casey. Keep it between us.
Right.
Who do you find more, not threatening, who do you think is a bigger danger? Who would you be more scared of to meet in real life? The wild and manic Cobell, or that measured facade of Milchick?
Well, there's something a bit psychotic about Milchick, I feel. I feel like I can't gauge Cobell because I don't know if there's something more going on with her character that they haven't talked about yet, because it feels like there's more going on, because when we're introduced to her at home, and she's got this shrine, and there's also like this sort of like, I don't know if it's like feeding apparatus or something, or some sort of like life support machine she's got, and it's got,
What's it?
it says Charlotte Cobell on it, and there's something going on there. Yeah, just around the shrine, and then there's like loads of other stuff going on in that entire place, but also like she's doing so many weird things throughout the show, because this is a weird show.
I should say, yeah.
She's pretending to be a nurse to help out Mark's sister so she can keep an eye on them. And she's also being Mark's neighbour, and she's just got her eyes on things, and she's doing stuff that she shouldn't necessarily be doing for Lumon, it seems.
Yeah, a great deal of which is, I think, completely unknown to everyone, including Milchick and what's his name, Grainy, the head of security guy. They're all quite surprised, I think, when they learn exactly the extent of what she's up to on the outside world. She's just doing all of that off her own back. But she is, she's the representation of the kind of the cult of Lumon. She's a fanatic of the cult of Lumon, whereas Milchick, I don't actually know. We don't see enough of him on the outside, I think, to know if he is a fanatic or if he's just a psycho who's good at his job.
That's interesting. You view her as a fanatic.
Absolutely, man.
I was just undecided about it, because I don't know whether she's trying to infiltrate Lumon in some sort of way. That was one of the things which was in the back of my head. I suppose the fanatical element could be the fact how strongly she reacts to being let go from the job. But then also, if she's been putting in effort to infiltrate Lumon, potentially, for whatever reason, then that could be another reason why she's so infuriated by it. But I mean, that's the joy of this show. You can't figure anything out, and it's like when we did our mini-series on devs, you spend the whole time just going, what if this is the answer, or what if this is the answer? But that's why these shows are so great, because they really get you thinking.
I was very much put in mind of devs throughout, and the kind of the cultish obsession with the main character there. Not the main character, the kind of the head of the company there, and just the weirdness surrounding the company and it being like a tech company. I was reminded of that, and also shades of Ex Machina as well. I think particularly the dance scene in the later in the series, but also some of the overall aesthetic is quite similar to Oscar Isaac's house and some of the basement rooms where she's kept in Ex Machina. So I think Alex Garland's been quite an influence on this, and Lost as well. Those were the two that really stuck in my mind. It felt very Dharma Initiative, but a less decrepit version of the Dharma Initiative.
I mean, they're messing around with numbers again, aren't they? Just like in Lost.
Yeah, that's very Lost, isn't it? That's where I have the most concerns about the longevity of this series, is the mystery of the numbers and how long we're going to wallow in the mystery box, and if we're going to attempt to climb out of the mystery box. Yeah,
because there is something quite sort of, in the way that Lost turned out to be quite spiritual yet quite fantasy-esque, I feel like that could come into this as well, because there's certain, we talked about some of the iconography in this, but there's stuff which is more than just modern day cults. It is like occult as well, like the stuff with all the goats.
Oh yeah,
and things like that. And there's like a dark room where things happen, and then sort of like all of that kind of element to it is kind of like it's got that in there as well.
Do you think all that is going somewhere? No, let me rephrase the question. Do you think all of that is in the back of Dan Erickson's mind, and is all mapped out? And do you think it will ever go anywhere, or do you think that will always be held in mystery?
This is the thing, isn't it? Because also the other thing I was thinking about when I was watching this was The Prisoner, if you've ever seen that. And it's sort of like this a similar kind of concept. Someone's trapped and they don't know how they got there, and that gets weirder and weirder as it goes on. And I do think that he's got a clear plan of this stuff, even if he's not going to reveal it. And part of me wants him not to reveal everything, because the more stuff you tell people, the less they can sort of make up their own minds about it and try and figure it out, because that's the joy of these shows, isn't it? It's trying to form your own opinions about what it all means. But he's definitely got a clear idea, because there's too much stuff in there which is it's definitely deliberate, and it's in the back of shots and all of this stuff. Like, there's lots of shots where, like, hell, you can read the word hell, like
Really?
someone will be covering up a P or something like that.
Right.
And there's lots of moments like that, and it seems like everything's very deliberate. Like when Marx goes on a date with the midwife, and then in the back of the shots it says something like Severance friendly clothing or something in one of the stores. It just seems like everything's so deliberate, and it's in there for a purpose. So I think there is like a grand plan for it, and everything's very, very deliberate, but I can't work it out yet. And I think it would be foolish to try and be like, right, this definitely means this and this definitely means that, because at this point it's all open to interpretation.
Yeah, I for my part, I'd sincerely hope we never find out very much about, in particular, what Lumon does, and I hope the show doesn't. I hope the show doesn't run for long enough where they get to the point where they feel like they have to try and unpack that and explore that. I love how intense it got with some of the more mysterious aspects, particularly like the waffle party. Like, it really, really went down an insane road. It would just be the worst thing for the show, I think, if we ever got to a point where it was explicitly clear why it was a goat and why it was what those dancers represented and all of that. It's much better to, I think, leave all that in the dark. But It did cross my mind, James. Would this be a satisfactory sort of revelation for you? Lumon might not do anything, or at least the severed floor might not do anything at all.
Yeah, that is a point as well, because it could all just be some sort of experiment, because we know that Lumon, but there's something about Lumon's past as well, isn't there? Because they're a medical company initially, aren't they? But now they do lots of other stuff.
Well, Lumon is huge, and it has an infinite amount of money, seemingly, like one of those huge companies would. And also, as the show progresses, it becomes clear that they don't just use Severance on their severed floor; they created Severance. It did strike me that there's a fairly good chance that the numbers aren't actually anything. They just need 20 to 40 severed employees busy for 8 hours a day, so that they have this working case study, so they can sell Severance to senators and then other companies. And then, there's obviously a lot more to it than that with the Lumon ideology seems to extend outside of the severed floor. We know that through Cobell. But yeah, I thought there was a good chance that they're not really doing anything. There's enough money to pour that down the drain so that you can just test Severance to then sell it to other companies.
Because even what they're doing, like with the numbers, they are invoking emotions in them, aren't they? It's like there's a feeling of fear when they find certain numbers, and there's other feelings I think they feel when they look at different numbers and stuff like that.
I think it was just fear. Fear was the indicator that they were onto something. But if I just stared at numbers all day and didn't have an existence outside of staring at numbers all day, I'm sure I'd just feel intense feelings, and then I could attribute them to some meaning. I'd prefer that than some sort of like telepathic magic that lets them be afraid of appropriate numbers.
I do feel like this is very sort of like, obviously it does have those elements of other sort of genres, but this is like a very much a science fiction concept. The idea that there can be a chip you put in your brain and it will split your memories by geography as well, from the sounds of it. So like that is a sort of like a mad science concept. But on top of that, you've got this kind of like virtual reality element in there as well. The fact that when they're in this office, it is almost like a virtual world to them. And you sort of like, you can't tell what's real outside and what's not. There's so much to that in there as well. Because I was wondering if there are more people who are severed in different ways that you just don't know about. Because even when because in one of the first episodes, they go to this dinner party, and Mark is talking to these friends of his sister's partner, and they're all quite weird.
Yeah.
Like, there's one guy who makes a comment about why was it called World War II or something like that, and it's like all of the way they talk is quite sort of stilted. I don't know if that's just to reflect how strange this world is that we're in anyway. And also, like, later on where you meet the woman at the book reading who just seems quite quirky, and she can't read properly or something, and she says, because she's got like some weird backstory to her. Everything is kind of like a bit off kilter with all of that.
Yeah, you're right. And well, with the guy who didn't understand the nomenclature of the world wars, that made me think it was set quite far in the future, because that's like episode 1 or 2, isn't it? And I wasn't totally located in time. But yeah, that's just bizarre. And yeah, you could very easily explain a lot of that behavior with Severance, or some sort of linkages to the weird cult of Lumon bleeding out into the rest of the world. There's more to this world, I think, than we just see in the show, or than is explicitly explained in the first series. Yeah.
And this is a dystopian story as well, isn't it? The idea that a big corporation comes in with this new technology that can change the world, basically. And that's kind of what we're seeing from Lumon potentially in the future, because in that final episode you see Keir Egan turns out to be Helly's dad.
No, it's Jaime Egan, isn't it? It's the current CEO. Keir Egan is the founder. Yeah.
See, again, even that, there's like all of these crazy founders, which we'll probably get into.
Yeah, it's totally a dystopia. I think it sits alongside what we're looking at in dystopian fiction more than VR. You mentioned VR before. I think it feels like a VR story because visually it borrows some of the cinematic language of virtual reality, which is the severed floor feeling like a dream space, but a sort of sci-fi dream space, which is the feel that VR evokes. But in terms of the storytelling, it's much more a dystopian story, I think, because the characters don't experience the virtual reality the way virtual reality characters experience it. When you enter a virtual reality, you're going into a different space and you can become a different person, but you have, generally speaking, you have awareness of who you are. So you're bringing that, and then you're becoming free to be who you always dreamed to be, like in Ready Player One, but you've usually got some sort of awareness. Whereas Severance, no one's having the virtual reality experience. We just have characters that are locked inside this VR world. They're more like the characters from, say, 13th Floor.
Yeah, see, that's how I viewed them. I saw them as the NPCs, because they're kind of like, they've got no autonomy, but they are trapped in this space.
Yeah, but they've been placed there by a dystopian society that's allowed this world to come into existence.
And another version of themselves who has subjected their other selves to this prison, which is even scarier.
Yeah, what did you think about that? That's the decision that people go through to have the severance procedure, particularly Helly, before we find out who Helly really is. The way Helly is presented to us early in the series as someone who's just made the decision and happy with it.
Yeah, Helly's is the most interesting case because she has such an adverse reaction to being in this workplace and not being able to get out and not having any memories. Like, she tries to commit suicide. That's the sort of the biggest extreme, but it's the reaction that her outie has. She's just like, don't ever do that again, or I will make your life a living hell. And it's just that sort of like, it's so vindictive. And it's like, it's a hate for yourself as well, isn't it? If you're sort of like looking down those lines, because there's a part of her that hates herself in this sort of like environment.
Kind of, but I think it was like a really good way of telling us, the audience, that the innies are totally distinct characters from the outies. That may have been explained in dialogue, but I don't think I as an audience member, I don't think I felt the weight of that until that scene where Helly has to watch the video from her outie, and that's when you really understand, like, these are different people entirely from the ground up. She's a different character. So I thought it was a very good moment in the, you know, in the timing of the series to drop that in so that you get hit with that.
Yeah, but then you compare the way that Helly's talking to herself to the way that Bert talks to himself when he's got his leaving party.
Yes.
So Bert, played by Christopher Walken, who is just like such a random person to have in all of this stuff.
He's friends with John Turturro. That's why he was cast. They've been friends for years, and John Turturro recommended him for the role because he knew they'd have good chemistry for what they needed to do for the story.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that. So his character is sort of like, he seems more like the Bert that we know, but he almost seems a bit sort of like sad that he doesn't know about his work life when he's giving his speech at the end, because he talks about like, oh, I'm sure you all know him very well, and I'm sure deep down I have feelings of like friendship for you all. And it's just sort of like he has a bit more of a heartwarming view of it. And sort of like as he's leaving, and later on you find out he's leaving because like it's not for any bad reason. You see that he's on the outside and he seems to be fine with his partner. But that's a completely different, because everybody has their own sort of slight different stories for why they're severed, haven't they?
Mm. Yeah, and again that retirement scene is another example of how good the pacing is throughout the series, because we, again, through dialogue, the sort of idea that if you retire, quit, resign, leave, that means death for the innie because they will cease to exist. Again, the kind of narrative weight of that I don't think lands, or it didn't land for me until Bert's resignation and just the sort of just the utter sadness on Irving's face as he's watching that, and watching the sort of happy celebrations of all of his teammates, but realizing what that means for the innie. That really hit home for me in that scene. But yeah, they've all got all sorts of reasons, haven't they? But I think that, well, we don't see enough of them, but the pervading reason does seem to be convenience, right? And presumably money. Did you get the impression that it was quite well compensated to be a severed worker?
Yeah, that's kind of like the impression that I got from it. I think sort of the person who has the most interesting reason is still Mark for me, because he is like, he's escaping his grief, isn't he, by signing up to this Severance project.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got the most compelling reason, but that's only because Adam Scott's kind of the de facto main character, which I thought was kind of a shame. And it doesn't, it becomes clear towards the end of the first series why we didn't see as much of Helly. You can't see any of Helly outside until the end of the series. It's a big twist. But I really felt like, because she's like so obviously the other main character when they're at work, you immediately want to see more of her. And then obviously like that video from her outie, suddenly the outie becomes an even more interesting off-screen character, where you're like, but by that point you're like, okay, now I know why I can't see her. She's just become like 100 times more interesting. That's why they're holding her back, and it's fine. But yeah, that's what makes Mark's reasons more nuanced and compelling. It's just we spend more time with him outside. I suppose everyone could have a very interesting reason.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of like, it's doing the Lost thing, isn't it? Where you've got all these characters and you're revealing stuff about them as it goes, and you're getting the backstory and you're filling in the blanks, and you're finding out more about their reasons for doing stuff. And I think that's only going to get better as we go on throughout sort of like the next series. But talking about sort of revealing stuff, we've already talked about sort of the geography of the actual workspace, but there are some really interesting places and departments. So I was just wondering sort of like what places stuck out for you in this sort of like the world of Lumon.
For me, I really like the perpetuity wing, because it's pretty bonkers, and it's nice to just reveal. It's the visual reveal of Keir Egan's house. It's so massive, and it's just like
just in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
it's so random,
and you're just like, how big is this? Where are we? Like, that's huge. But the thing that really stuck with me is the break room, particularly when we get into Irv's home life and his paintings. It's just like, it's heartbreaking to see that he just spends all of his free time painting one image of the entrance to the break room. It's so
Is that
upsetting.
definitely the entrance to the break room? Because I thought that was the entrance to the lift that you see Miss Casey go down later on. Again, it's just a dark corridor with like a red arrow at the end.
What lift does she go down?
So you know when so Miss Casey,
Yeah.
who is sort of like the counselor, she is sort of like, she's kicked out of Lumon, and you see her go down this long corridor, and then there's a door at the end, and it's a lift, and she's going somewhere else, but it's a lift we haven't seen before.
Right.
And it's going downwards.
Right.
But it would make more sense for Irving to be seeing the break room, because that's a place where he's been. But I did wonder, because again, it's just another dark corridor with a sort of a mysterious exit. But either way, sort of this break room is having a major psychological effect on these people, because it is torture, isn't it? Just in the middle of your working day, if you've done something wrong, you have to sit in this room and recite this almost gibberish apology. And then there's weird noises coming in for a speaker as well, and they're different for each person, which I think really adds to it.
Yeah, that part was horrible and very, very lost. That really felt like a Dharma Initiative psychological experiment, with the mystical forces making noises that's different for everyone. And very creepy and horrible as well. Like, can you imagine being at work and being forced to apologize? Well, I mean, like, I can imagine being forced to apologize for doing something wrong at work, but being forced to apologize until you could medically prove that you felt legitimately sorry, like in your soul. Like, I think that's just horrible and scary.
It's so weird. And so that's their sort of like enforcement procedure, but then they've got like the positive reinforcement in the form of the weird gifts that they get when they do a good job, like the finger traps and the weird caricatures that they get, and all of this weird shit that they get given for doing well, and the waffle party, which is like the grand prize. Yeah. You get to have a lovely waffle in Egan's house, and then you're allowed to go on the bed which you weren't allowed to go on when they were doing the tour.
Well, I don't know if you're allowed to go on it. You pick up a Keir Egan mask and then you move on, don't you? Yeah, I didn't really get the finger traps and the waffle party and all of that at first glance, especially the finger traps. It was such a weird thing, and he was so proud of having like 8 of them. But as you go on, you just realise that, like, particularly with Dylan and Irving, they've been there for long enough, and we don't know anything else about them, and they don't know anything else about themselves. So they've just chosen to go all in on something that's there. So for Dylan, it's being good at the job because there are small rewards and there's nothing else to do. So yeah, a finger trap would be exciting because there is nothing else there. And for Irving, it's going in hard on the Egan philosophy and the employee handbook / Bible. You know, he's becoming a convert and a fanatic just because there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else in his life apart from it's either that or the finger traps, and they've just chosen different paths.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't think anybody was out here. I'm coming out for my session. I was just going in. I was admiring the art while I wait. That piece hung in the perpetuity wing for many years. I know. It broke my heart when they took it down. It's better here. It's calming. I'm Irving, macro data refinement.
Are you a department head?
Well, optics and design. A 2-person department, so barely.
So this is your work?
We don't paint them. We do hang them.
I loved that you did the Ambrose cycle in the team building space last quarter.
Huh.
I'd never seen it.
It's rare to meet a sophisticate. Most people only think of O&D when new handbook totes come in.
Well, I love those too.
Yeah? There's new ones coming next month. Best design yet, in my view.
Oh, wow. Now, that's all I'll be thinking about until then.
Irving?
So, what were the sort of places on the severed floor that really stuck out for you?
Well, I mean, the weird room with the guy with the goats was one which was just mental. I'm trying to think what else was weird. Like, there was a weird room with plants in, which just seemed a bit random. But there was also something about the, like, optics and design and just all of these 3D printers they've got lined up. And then they sort of deal with the art department stuff of it as well. And just all the weirdness surrounding that, because they're making, like, watering cans, and then one day they might be making hatchets, apparently. So all of this random stuff that seemingly has no connection. And then the craziness that ensued after Milchick found out that one of the cards had been taken. A card which looked like it was some instruction on to do some sort of kung fu move. It was like all of the weirdness surrounding that, I think really, I just love it because I have no idea what it is, but there's something just very intriguing about all of that.
Yeah, I think MDR and O&D, they're the two full working departments where we have a grasp of what the job is in MDR and O&D, even though it doesn't make any sense. But both of them kind of fit in with my theory that Lumon might not do anything on the severed floor. I can buy that both of them are just tasks with no reason, just to get 8 hours of severed work to sort of as a proof of concept for Severance. It's the other stuff, like definitely the goats room. That's where it strays into a more mythological thing where I think it doesn't quite support my idea. It is actually a whole weird, I don't know, possibly occult thing going on. Goats in particular are very occult, aren't they?
Definitely. And what did you think about sort of the mysterious higher-ups as well? Because there is something sort of like...
the board.
Yeah, the board. So it is sort of like they're disembodied voices again, but we only ever hear one word from the board, don't we? Other than the stuff that's relayed by their assistants.
Yeah, they're primarily a disembodied non-voice. They're the absence of a voice. They're just radio static. Not even radio static, just like... How would you describe it? It's the sound of an empty room almost, with maybe a breath, over that little crackly old radio. And again, it's a bit of old-fashioned technology to add to that aesthetic. I really liked the character that was their mouthpiece and the relationship that she had with Cobell. That was cool. But I found the board so threatening. It was like, who's in charge of the law firm in Angel? And do we ever see
Wolfram
them?
and Hart.
Yeah.
The Wolf, the Ram and the Hart.
Right, okay. Is there not a board? Or is it Wolfram and a wolf, a ram and a hart or something like that?
Well, that's what their mythological name to it. I don't think there was an actual, but their board is sort of like these otherworldly entities.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we do see them later in Angel, like when they take over. But early on, they're like this disembodied thing. And also, what else is it like? It's like the cabin in the woods, the monster underground. It's just like, it's just off screen. So Wolfram and Hart and Cabin in the Woods, I think we do see the things, but I prefer it the way Severance is doing it, because there's no reason not to suspect that the board is just one or more human beings, certainly weird human beings, but just humans, but invoking that kind of feel of Cabin in the Woods and Angel makes them scary, because you can't see them, and what you can't see is scary.
Yeah, and it does have that kind of Cabin in the Woods vibe, definitely, because like even the idea it's like some sort of experiment or ritual, it's kind of in there, isn't it, in this? Like I felt those kind of things. But it could just be because you've got like the sci-fi elements and you've got some sort of occult stuff which is alluded to in certain like iconography in it.
Yeah, and that dancing, the waffle party, kind of ramps up the occult feeling, doesn't it? I
feel like we keep just coming back to the waffle party just because it's such a great scene.
Well, do you know what's weird as well is that Dylan is looking forward to the waffle party, isn't he? I think.
Yeah, he's obviously had a waffle party before, but then I didn't know if it turned into like a weird orgy. I thought there was something else going on.
Maybe it was. Maybe that's why he was looking forward to it. If that was your only sort of experience of sex, and you have to like be performer of the quarter in order to get it.
He never picked up the Cat of Nine Tails either. You could see him eyeing it up, and then that's got written on it all the 9 core principles.
Of course it does.
I think so.
Why wouldn't it?
Of course.
Do you know what did you catch the 9 core principles?
No, but I've since been on Twitter, and you can look up at Lumon Industries, and then one of their tweets is, what are the 9 core principles? They've got them down here. Would you like me to recite them to you?
Yeah, what are they?
So it's vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, and wiles.
Right, don't a lot of those words mean quite similar things to each other?
Yeah.
Wit and cheer were in there. Humility and benevolence. I suppose those are different things, aren't they? But yeah.
Hey, they mean a lot to Lumon, clearly.
Yeah, Keir Egan, clearly a man of vision, and 8 other things.
Definitely, it's but all in all, I've really enjoyed this series, and just like I feel like there's been something more each episode, or there's been something a little bit offbeat which has just kept my interest. Even like the weird dance party that they had, and you were talking about Milchick being sinister and sort of like how calm and collected he is. There's something so sinister about his dance, because he's properly going for it, and then he's dancing all up on Dylan in this weird sort of semi-hostile manner.
It's like Carlton Banks meets Hannibal Lecter, isn't it?
But he can properly move as well, but it's also sort of like, it's just out of nowhere.
Yeah, very, very scary. And when he realised that when he has to go and... Oh, I'll tell you who he reminds me of. Patrick Bateman. Absolutely Patrick Bateman.
Yes.
Because that's the scene where he very suddenly has to go and... I have to go and deal with a management issue. That's very... I have to return some videotapes, isn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely... Oh, he's definitely got Patrick Bateman vibes.
That's what I find so creepy about him. And why it's such a brilliant performance from Tillman, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you 100%. I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, but it's like, you know, it's hard to talk about everything. It's a 9-episode series. Yeah. But I absolutely loved it. It was a pleasure to binge it as quickly as I did, because I wouldn't... No, it would be nice to watch it week by week, but it's also a lot of fun. It reminded me of the first time I saw season 1 of Lost, which I watched... I mean, I was watching like 8 or 9 episodes a day instead of revising for my GCSEs.
It's got that kind of like binge ability to it, definitely. And I mean, there's only more stuff that's going to be revealed in the next series. I mean, they had the amazing finale where the innies finally get out.
Oh God, we haven't even talked about that, James.
I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? So like, when Dylan's got both of the levers and he's pulling them on to try and make sure that they can stay sort of in their outie bodies because of the geography of it or something crazy. But it's just like, it's so intense. And I was on the edge of my seat for that entire episode, because something was happening each time when it was like, fuck, this is going to happen. We're not going to see this, or they're not going to get to that point. And like, he's just missed this person. It's so intense. And it's like, it's nail biting, that last episode.
Again, it's pacing, isn't it? I've mentioned it a couple of times. Pacing throughout the 9 episodes is perfect all the way through the season. And then singularly within that episode, it is perfectly paced. It builds up to that episode, and then the entire episode is a climax for the season. And it's brilliant. It's one of the best single episodes of television I've seen in ages, and certainly one of the best season finales I've seen since, I don't know, in years, maybe ever.
Because it's just reveal upon reveal, and the whole time it's on a time limit, because you know it's not going to last forever. They're not going to be able to find out all the things they need to find out in this time period, because they're going to switch out into their outies. So yeah, and just of course the big reveal for me was the sort of like, you want Mark to tell like his sister that his wife's alive and is in fact the counselor. They did the sort of subtle reveal in the episode before, but then finally having that opportunity for him to find out. But again, because they're separate people, basically, his innie and his outie, How are they going to relay the information? It was just too much, Matt. It's too much. I'm getting worked up.
Is that the very final shot of Mark yelling, "She's alive"? Is that the very final shot of the series? Yeah, amazing. Very good note to go out on, because also like it's reveals and twists and a huge cliffhanger, but it's also it's an incredibly satisfying cliffhanger, because just him managing to scream "she's alive" in a room full of people while holding a picture of his wife, there's enough there that, like, if there was no season 2 and nothing else happened, a message has got out. That is an ending. That is some sort of resolution for Mark. I mean, it opens up a whole world of other questions and trouble for his character, but a lot of satisfaction in that moment, which is, it's incredible. It's incredible to get away with ending your series on a cliffhanger that is also very satisfying in a narrative sense.
Yeah, they've done really well with that, because each episode ended on a kind of cliffhanger, but that final one was just satisfying as well.
So James, would you get severed for work if you had assurances? In this hypothetical, I'm assuring you're not going to work at Lumon, you're not going to work for a cult where you will be tortured.
Am I not going to work from home as well? Because that would be a weird severance.
You won't know. Oh, well, you can't. No, you can't work from home. Yeah, no, of course not. Unless you had like a home office and that was your geographical limitation. So just doing like your job or any job that isn't Lumon, would you get severed?
Probably not, just because of all the trouble it causes.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also, like, there is something about, like, you like, I kind of sometimes like my work relationships because it gives you something to moan about as well if they're not great. Like, you can moan about work and stuff to people, and everybody does that, and it's something that everyone has in common. Like, some days you love it, some days you hate it, and it's all of that kind of thing. And I think that's just part of life, isn't it? Work is it's so fundamental to people's lives now that it always comes in, like, to conversations.
You're so mature, James. You're so wise. I was thinking, like, the way it's presented to the world in Severance, I'd be up for it. Like, setting aside
that paycheck.
Yeah, well, definitely that. But, like, it just seems really convenient. But then, obviously, as the series progresses, setting aside Lumon and all its weirdness, you're shown how evil and cruel it would be to create a being that exists only to work for you, so you don't have to. So I was sort of like, like looking at the ground, like, oh, okay, I guess it's bad. I wouldn't do it.
But it's like, what would you talk to people about at work? Because you couldn't talk to them about the new shows you've been watching, like Severance, because you wouldn't have watched them. You'd have to talk to them about
James,
the new handbook.
James, what I talk to people at work about is not my problem. That would be my innie's problem. I don't know what I talk to people at work about. I'm severed. That is not my problem.
Well, I'm sure you'll get a notification in your emails as soon as the Severance package is available.
The music dance experience is officially canceled.
Well, that's it for our episode on Severance. We hope you enjoyed listening back to that one which we recorded back in 2022 when the first series came out. And of course, the new series comes out on the 17th of January this year. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be out on Apple Plus, I believe. So we will definitely be covering that on the Patreon feed after we've had time to binge all of that new series. I can't wait to find out what happens in the next series of Severance. In the meantime, you can always get in touch with us. You can follow us on all the social media channels. You can find us on journeythroughsci-fi.com if you want to go to our website. And if you're enjoying the show, why not leave us a lovely review? We love to hear from you guys, so please feel free to do that. We will be back later this month with another Future Frontiers episode, and we'll be back to our Mad Science series. The next one up is The Man in the White Suit and Jurassic Park, so that should be a good one. We'll be back in your podcast feed soon. Thanks again for listening.